Should we get Labour's take this morning? We can talk to the Shadow Levelling Up Secretary, Lisa Nandy, who joins us now from central London. Thanks very much for being with us. We just heard from... You're not in central London, are you? Apologies, you're in Wigan. This is the kind of thing to get to get right. Now, we just heard from Mark Harper. He's obviously adopting a softer tone towards the unions, but he was pretty clear that public sector pay rises that match inflation or bust inflation are unaffordable. Are they?
Well, they're unaffordable because of 12 years of Tory government and 44 days in which Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng crashed the economy. And I think there ought to be a level of humility about that within government. What he should be doing is moving heaven and earth to try and avert strikes coming up this winter. It's been a really tough year for a lot of people and nobody wants to see strikes, least of all the people who are having to resort to strike action. It's worth noting that we're in this position because ministers have been refusing to meet the workforce for some considerable time. It's very welcome that Mark Harper has taken a different approach, met with the RMT this week, and by all accounts it was a very positive meeting. But it is ludicrous that we're weeks away from more strike action and we're congratulating a government minister for simply turning up and doing the very bare basics of his job.
At the very beginning of that answer, you said that public sector pay rises that match inflation are unaffordable because of the Conservatives. I'm just interested in that line, because Andy Burnham said, he's right behind the nurses, COVID claps don't pay the bills. Are you saying that actually, realistically, inflation-busting pay rises, including the 19% being asked for by nurses, are actually unaffordable?
Well, look, the truth is I don't know. The government hasn't opened the books to us. So in the case of nurses, for example, we're not privy to National Health Service negotiations, and it would be absurd for me to try and conduct those negotiations live on air. What I can tell you is that if we were in government, we would be treating the nurses as partners. They haven't been on strike for 106 years and they've had to resort to strike action because the Health Secretary, Stephen Barclay, wouldn't even meet them over the summer until it was confirmed that the strikes were going ahead. I was in my local hospital just yesterday talking to nurses, talking to the management. They're trying to work out how they're going to get through those days of strike action together and keep patients safe. They would much rather be at work. And one of the things that we've proposed that would help to ease that burden is to scrap non-dom tax status and expand the NHS workforce, because part of the problem that they've got is not just that they can't afford to put food on the table for their families, but they're overworked and burnt out and they don't know how they can go on like this.
You were pictured on a picket line in Wigan with striking workers back in August. Would you be joining a picket line with the nurses?
I'm not planning to go down to the picket line because when I spoke to members of the Royal College of Nursing and to the General Secretary of Unison, they left me in no doubt that where they want me is in Parliament doing my job so that they can do theirs. I'm one of the few people in this country who can actually demand that ministers come into Parliament and hold their feet to the fire. We're going to dial up the pressure on government ministers who've been utterly complacent in order to get them round that negotiating table and get a negotiated settlement. It is possible. I know that because I've spoken to nurses across the country, including here in Wigan, in just the last few days. They desperately want to avoid strike action and they're only here after 106 years because of a government that refused to negotiate with them. The problem in this country is not militant workers, it's a militant government.
Now, today you've got some new research out that you say shows that levelling up isn't working. According to your analysis, £568 million has been lost from levelling up funds due to inflation. So does that mean that Labour would like to spend an extra £500 million on levelling up?
No, but we will keep promises that we make, unlike this government. They made huge promises at the last general election that they were going to level up this country, and now they've had to pull their flagship legislation. They've wasted weeks of council's time on bids for investment zones that have now gone into the bin. They had 12 levelling up director posts, which they advertised at the start of this year, that are still not in place. And now we've found out that £560 million has been wiped off the value of those funds because of their disastrous handling of the economy. It's a poor record for something that was the ticket to electoral success for the Conservatives at the last election. And at the next election, we're going to come in, win the trust of the people back and start to set this right.
Now, this week, UK net migration hit an all-time high, 504,000. Is that something we should be comfortable with because there are vacancies in the job market, or is it something that Labour would like to see, a number that Labour would like to see come down?
I think that very high levels of immigration are unsustainable because we haven't invested in our young people. We're really proud here in Wigan of the fact that we're able to attract people to come from all over the world and work in our National Health Service. But for young people who live just a few streets away from our local hospital, they might as well as dream of going to the moon as to getting a job there, because the nursing bursary has been abolished and the education maintenance allowance and aim higher and all of the things that built the ladder that helped them to get there. So we believe in a points-based immigration system. That's what we introduced when we were in government. But we want to align that much more closely to skills so that we first invest in our young people to be able to get the jobs that exist and then look to fill vacancies and ask immigrants to come here because they make a significant contribution in order to fill those gaps.
There's been a bit of confusion, shall I say, and actually from myself as well, about what Labour's position is when it comes to migration. Keir Starmer gave a speech, didn't he, last week to the CBI, and the Daily Telegraph headline was "Starmer, UK must wean itself off migrant labour." The headline on The Independent was "Labour pledges to relax immigration rules." What is Keir Starmer's position on immigration? Does he think it's too high, or does he think there should be more of it?
Well, we want to see a government that invests in young people in Britain first and foremost to fill labour shortages, but we recognise too that immigration has a significant contribution to make, not least at the moment where you've got short-term gaps in the labour market that currently can't be filled. So last Christmas there was a consensus that during the petrol crisis it would be worth relaxing rules temporarily to get HGV drivers to be able to deliver petrol and keep the country moving. But we want to see a sensible approach to immigration with a plan. And at the moment what we've got is this absurd situation where the government floats these ideas, like cutting foreign student numbers, which is their latest. Only 2 weeks ago the Higher Education Minister was bragging about the fact that they'd attracted 600,000 students to come and study here in Britain a decade earlier. And now we've got ministers posturing, saying that they're going to crack down on the very people that just 2 weeks ago they were begging to come here. We need a serious plan to fill our labour shortages and invest in young people here in Britain, not these back-of-a-fag packet policies that unravel as soon as they're announced.
Now, you published a book this week, All In, How We Build a Country That Works. I just want to read you the first line of the New Statesman review that says there's an alternate universe in which Lisa Nandy won the 2020 Labour leadership election. For anyone wishing to imagine the kind of leader she would have been, her new book, All In, will help. So what would be the main difference in Labour policy then if you'd won in 2020 rather than Keir Starmer?
Well, I think the fact that I'm writing this book and I was tasked with Keir in thinking through how we're going to rebuild this country from the ground up, drawing on the contribution and the potential and the assets in every person in every part of Britain, shows you that we are a team and that we're drawing on the strengths of very different parts of our labour movement in order to speak directly to the country. That it's been a significant privilege to serve as Shadow Foreign Secretary, but when I was moved into this position a year ago, it was because we know that the only way that we're going to rebuild this country is by recognising the contribution that people have to make in every part of Britain that's been written off and written out of the national story by this government. We're determined to set this right. That's what this book's about, and Keir is fully behind the fact that we've got to have not just a critique of the Tories, but be a genuine alternative. That's what he was setting out this week, that's what Rachel Reeves has been setting out, and that's what I've helped to set out in this book that was released this week.
Very quickly, because I do have to let you go. Matt Hancock's made the final of I'm a Celebrity. Politicians normally get voted out first. Why do you think he's done so well?
I don't know, but I think he should be at work. He's still being paid to be a Member of Parliament, and if he's anything like me, he'll be absolutely overwhelmed with cases of people who just don't know how they're going to get through the hardest winter imaginable because the Tory government, of which he was a central part, has crashed the economy and left people paying the price. I think he needs to get out of that jungle, get back to work and start repairing some of that damage.
OK, Lisa Nandy, thank you very much indeed.